Product Management and Operations at Tamer, and I'm serving as a track co-producer alongside Prashanth Sukal and Eddie Torno for Virtual Track G, Global Issues in Data Analytics and Management. It's my pleasure to introduce the next session, Data Analytics to Counter Cloud Abuse. In this session, you will hear cloud agnostic solutions for how to use data analytics to safeguard your cloud solutions. Before I hand things over to our speaker, I have a few housekeeping items. This session is being recorded. Any presentations will be included in the symposium proceedings, and video recordings will be uploaded to the CDOIQ YouTube channel 3 months after the symposium. There'll be Q&A session at the end. Please submit your questions via the Whova's Q&A tab. With that, I'll turn things over to this session speaker, Russ McRee, Director, GCP Enterprise Protection at Google. Russ, over to you.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it. I will share the deck here. I really will, I promise. There we go. Cool. Good morning, good evening. Welcome all. In essence, my team is a group of folks who are charged with defending cloud, and as such, I believe I've got an interesting and compelling story for you, particularly from a data officer and data analyst perspective. I have, even though currently work for Google, I want to make sure you understand this is not a pitch deck. This is not a use our cloud deck. This is agnostic to all clouds. Prior to my role at Google, I worked for Microsoft Azure in the Microsoft Security Response Center, as an example. So I have seen and participated in the worst of the internet's events over the last 15 years. And have seen abuse from the perspective that I think few can appreciate and understand and share. And I hope to make some of that useful for you today, particularly with the desired outcome of protecting yourself as you grow your presence in cloud, your organization's presence in cloud, and you do need to come to recognize some of the attack vectors and the abuse opportunities that exist, even with simple things like misconfiguration. I've tried to limit my amount of information I have in slides. Please note a few things. That one, I'm not going to go super deep on technical, exactly how we do the special sauce, if you will, because one, obviously that would tip hands if we're recording, and I don't want to expose undue information. But I will gladly do some deep dives after the fact. If there are some interesting highlights for anybody in these conversations and you wish to have a chat afterwards, we can share email, and I'm definitely able to go into some of the mitigation processes and how to think about the analytics itself. But with that, we only have about 22 minutes to get through some content. So most importantly, and I believe this number is low, when the estimated use of cloud for crypto mining to be $100 million in 2022, I really think that's an underestimate by probably a magnitude of a fifth short. I'm going to go with, personally, based on things I've seen in totals I've seen and that I'm aware of, I think it's between 100 and 500 million, to be very honest with you. But this is a public source that can be cited. So, but with it, keep in mind, crypto mining is really only one of 13 plus vectors that most cloud operators track from an abuse perspective. And again, note this about abuse. This is not us tracking things that are perpetrated against our clouds where they're attacking us. This is the things that are bad happening from our cloud against others, or in the cloud denying good resources to others, which crypto mining is. When somebody steals resources to crypto mine, those are resources that could otherwise be used by good customers, and worse still, it's candidly, it's bad for the hardware itself. It shortens the life cycle of GPUs, graphic processing units, significantly, as an example. So that landscape, as I described, is vast. There's of course the simplest of things like content abuse. They're all used to and unfortunately suffer when you think about phishing or getting sent something with an attachment, including malware, intrusion attempts, network abuse is pretty commonplace. We see it up to and including for political purposes. When the Russia-Ukraine war broke out, there were attacks specifically from one nation state against the other in the cloud using cloud resources. But again, predominantly, most of the abuse we see and how your own resources are most likely to be misused if they are compromised and acquired by an adversary is for purposes of the resource itself, for cryptocurrency mining, for things like illegal streaming, and again, potentially hosting content you certainly would not want associated with your business. The way we currently have our organizational structure, and this is not required or mandatory, it's somewhat unique in this counter abuse team's case. In prior roles and organizations, we've done it a little differently, but I have two very distinct teams. One is the security engineering group that does threat detection and analysis, as I'll describe here. And the other is a pure data science team doing exactly that, ML, applied statistics, and of course, moving to AI as well. There's opportunity for certain to use large language models and palm models as well, but it has to be done carefully. It has to be done deliberatively, and there is, of course, an incredible cost associated with it. Those models are not inexpensive to run. But on the threat detection and analytics side, obviously, when we think about aggregation, there's a ton of data and sourcing that we've got to take into account, and unfortunately, that means latency really becomes an issue as well. So one of the efforts we've been making is really trying to reduce the time it takes to consume the data, to then normalize it, to dedupe it, and of course, then as we seek to avoid false positives and potentially, as an example, turning off a good customer who's probably doing something that looks like it might be crypto mining, but in fact is just compute heavy, and is perfectly legitimate, we certainly wouldn't want to ever turn folks like that off and create pain for them. So in working closely towards false positives, we have to do a lot of scoring, and to do so when we add context and enrichment, which can include location, reputation, length of the life cycle of the account and the associated Gaia. We'll talk about all those things. All of those need to be taken into account as part of the data analytics to ensure that we're doing our work accurately and enabling good customers, not harming them, while we also prevent the misuse of the cloud. And again, to do that, a lot of the ways and means we think about how to create classifications, reputation is one of them. So obviously on a scale of 1 to 5, we can start at very low and end at very high, with obviously a medium in between. That reputation can be applied directly to a specific set of projects. In Google Cloud in particular, project is simply the way to say, I have gathered 2 virtual machines, a body of storage, some specific bandwidth, and a GPU to perform a specific action. All of that might fall under the premise of your project. To pay for it, obviously, there's a billing account associated with it. To make use of it, there's your identity or your organization identity. That's the Gaia. And to ensure the safe use of it within the realm of that which you have paid for as a good customer, there is a cap or a limit, set in essence as a quota. And again, you can use, and we do use, reputation as part of our qualifier for that. But in addition, there are some ML opportunities to look ahead based on behaviors, which we'll talk about, that really does help us do what we might call a more crystallized version of it, that's got some dynamics that allows good customers to grow accordingly, but very quickly shortens the life cycle of abuse. So a quota and reputation are very valuable for us in how we do this. Some of the models we used for a variety of purposes. When we think about the quotas and what we might call the fine tuning, the very granular version of it, that includes use of neural networks. When we think about entity mapping and assigning an evaluation of trust of a given customer, graph mining has come a long way for us. And when we think about very early in life cycle discriminant analysis, obviously LDA helps us do so in parallel with different data streams and different insights from, again, billing and reputation and APIs and what other abuse and risk signals. And even you would think it would be easy in large scale clouds to share information across businesses. The example would be, does Azure share abuse data with M365? The answer should be yes. Sometimes for purposes of protecting customer information, customer data, and privacy, it's not as easy as you might think. So how to share data across cloud sources becomes a very interesting challenge and a problem space, even within the context of individual clouds, because of those privacy commitments, obligations, and requirements. So I'm making it sound easy. Trust me when I say at scale, it is not. But when we think about predictive analytics and how we might want to be able to look ahead, obviously also taking in the trend set from look back, if we see the premise or the practice of future payment increasing, we can basically treat that as a feed forward and recognize that the input from the data together from future payment prediction, future abuse prediction, if payments are increasing, great. We can give more quota and more opportunity in the cloud if it all goes well. Conversely, if we see early indicators of abuse or the likelihood of abuse, even that is a thing, we may conduct a downgrade, and that downgrade can include reduced amount of usage via quotas. It can include a lowered reputation and certainly a decrease in score. So it's not unlike credit scoring as you might see in finance. It's got some serious analogies to the methods used by financial organizations to evaluate their customers. And there's nothing wrong with that. When we think about it, though, a lot of these pools of data and the insights, particularly as it comes from tagging, also lead us to wonderful clustering opportunities. I'll talk about that a little bit in a second. But it is vital in our case, as the model updates, again, feeds the information forward, it's got to really be continuously updated and evaluated. And by that too, the model often needs to be slightly tuned or adjusted and retrained. And you ask why it should be a consistent set of information. The reality is cloud services vary wildly in that, just as an example, and I'll cover Google here, you've got AI products like Vertex, you've got compute products, you've got Kubernetes engine, you've got Quick Labs, on and on and on. There are these various different offerings that by definition have what you might call different behavioral profiles, and the users of them have slightly different behavioral profiles, and good customers of those services have a different profile than does an abusive user. So that retraining becomes somewhat important depending on the target for the model itself. So with that, we do have to do a great deal of performance evaluation and tuning and monitoring of the model as well. When we think about graph mining, obviously, data analysts from a perspective of what's easier, looking at a table of data and running queries in some form of SQL syntax, or is it preferred to have a visualization that might pop out a highlight or an outlier or a hot cluster if it's a heat map. You pick your opportunity. The reality is that visualization as a starting point for analytics, and also just the premise of the mining itself and the network created in a graph set of concepts, goes a long way for us when we think about establishing trust. So we take in the features again of the billing data very early on, the related project data, the user data, and the overall organizational structure. And we use that to literally map the trustworthiness of the customer. The beauty and the flexibility of graph mining in this context is the ability to take in additional features and also share the output across a number of other cross-functional organizations that might be able to take use of that same insight. Because if, as an example, a user with a given Gaia is proven quickly and early in the life cycle to be less trustworthy, and they're a user of other cloud services, that information is then useful to those other cloud services again. So we might want to share it and have them be able to consume it with that panoramic view. And really, again, my mission, our team's mission, is not first and foremost to prevent use of the cloud. It's actually to enable good use and ensure the good use while at the same time preventing bad. And that's a very interesting balance. It's again hard. It's super easy to just say no to all bad things. It's more difficult to have to be very crisp about the analysis, recognize that you are impacting good customers if you're not tuned properly and you're creating potential for false positives, which we really go out of our way to eliminate. Again, with LDA, the simplest reality there is as early as possible in a life cycle, particularly as it pertains to billing and payment information, you have the ability to almost prevent abuse before it begins based on the patterns being seen. There are other similar scenarios that we are able to do on the network with pure network telemetry based solely on flows. This is not, packet inspection of private information that is going across the network encrypted. It is very simply the high level tagged information that comes from things like source IP, destination IP, source ports, destination ports, where the calls are going. Are they going out to crypto mining command and control units, known on other clouds? That's interesting information. But so too in this case for the use of LDA is the early on billing information that lets us look forward to the prediction, if you will, and the prevention of loss events. Obviously, when you think about the abuse of cloud and the resources therein, there are lots of financial attachment to that, in the sense of how much it costs to run the resources being abused, and the fact that they're not in use by good customers, it really racks up. And again, you saw the estimate at the beginning that said $100 million estimated in 2022 for just crypto mining. Trust me when I say there's a lot of loss associated with this. So again, the response can be suspend accounts, drop the scores, downgrade the reputation, and completely disable, as it might be appropriate after proper classification of those loss events. And we're going to get here into some of the most important pieces of this when you think about it, because you'll note as part of our classifier, we include things like leaked or compromised credentials. And you're probably saying to yourself, well, my credentials are perfectly safe. And maybe they are. Or maybe your development team thought they should hard code the service token, service account for your cloud resources for their development projects, to hard code that into their scripts and post it to GitHub. Well, guess what? When that happens, it is absolutely brutal, because it's very quickly discovered and used against those resources. And often we see a fair bit of that, much more than we'd like. And we really are making every effort to, and I say we, the entirety of the cloud universe, not just Google or Microsoft or Amazon or others. It really wants to make that journey a lot more difficult, recognizing how often it happens. So when we think about the importance of your identities and the need and desire to mitigate accordingly, you've got to protect them. And of course, obviously, avoiding social engineering, heightened awareness, recognizing depending on the intellectual property you may be working on or are party to might increase the likelihood of interest from up to and including nation states. So when you come to realize that if you have something good and useful in this world, it's often desirable to bad people and is likely to become a target, that means you then are too, and you'll see more social engineering. You'll see more attempt to steal your identities. It shocks me to this day that, I remind folks to enable multi-factor authentication anywhere and everywhere you can, because you should not be able to go execute a significant change in your cloud portal that affects the entirety of your cloud infrastructure without having to utilize a multi-factor authentication, and then preferably, not just an SMS text, but something that is unique token based or an authenticator app that generates it. Because, and this is shocking to me, there have been the last couple of years been adversaries who are so good at social engineering. You've probably heard of Lapsus, a separate topic for another day. Deep dive on a different call with that one. But that adversary group was able to not only steal credentials, but to often socially engineer their victims into mashing the button on their authenticator and pushing the request through, even with the multi-factor. So again, it's just essential to recognize the combination of effort that will be applied against you and your identities. Misconfiguration is on one hand, you think, oh, it's easy to avoid and you can and should do so. And yet it's also very easy to make mistakes. A lot of people think lifting and shifting their on-premises infrastructure is just a straight shot to the cloud to some similar and related service that you used to have on premises. It is not that simple. And it is very easy to misconfigure your permissions or to even simply misunderstand your permissions, resulting in something that might be too weak of a setting or overly permissive. And trust me when I say the adversaries know those weaknesses as well as anybody, and they're automating their efforts against determining the strength of configurations, because sometimes even simple business logic can create opportunities for adversaries to do things like bypass a quota control. So maybe they come in with a very low reputation, super inexpensive account, and somebody else's credentials gain a foothold, expand, and take advantage of the business logic flaw that can enable it. So there's a few ways I recommend, and this is where I would heartily offer to you deep dives after the fact. If you want to talk about how to cloud threat model and what it looks like to determine the threats that might exist for your business, your data, your interests in the cloud. But the threat modeling practice, as so well understood for software, works just as well for services. We're very close to what will be a published framework and process for very specifically cloud abuse threat modeling. And I would say 3 to 4 months. That paper should be published and resources available. I'm absolutely glad to talk about some of this with you in advance, though. But using that threat model to protect your services and infrastructure really goes a long way, because if you do it early in your integrations, in your use of cloud, you can candidly prevent having to go bolt on some after action as a result of already having suffered a loss or a compromise. Do it early, do it fast, do it often, and build in the appropriate engineering and preventative measures as fast as you can so that you don't have to go back and fix it. Purple teaming, very finally here before we get to questions, is the premise of an adversarial mindset, somebody who might even be what you would call a pen tester or a red teamer sitting with you in literally, like, yes, many of us work virtually, but if you're in office, you return to office, have that person right next to your defenders and those who are doing your site reliability engineering and those who are doing DevOps for your cloud presence, and work together hand in hand as part of the outcome of your threat model. Conduct stimulus action, adversarial actions against your services. Make sure they're either prevented and or identified and detected. And if they're not, work in near real time to close those gaps together. So you have the red folks, and defenders are often in the military context, the blue folks, join them together. You've got a purple team approach, and you're doing very real time defenses and protection against your services. And that brings me literally at 25 minutes and opens us up to the opportunity for questions. So Sam, I don't know if you have anything in the queue there, but I am glad to take it.
I haven't seen anything come through. Just a reminder, if you want to submit a question, you can put it right in the Q&A section of Whova to the right of the video. But while we're waiting to see if any questions come in, you're talking about the purple team approach. What does that practically look like in a day-to-day, pulling some of those team members together, especially for some of these organizations where they might not have that? Are there outsource options or other ways that they can? There
are some outsource options, and yes, if you don't have the opportunity to have your own, call them an adversarial team internally, it is definitely something that can be outsourced. Just be mindful as if you go looking for consultants to conduct what might be referred to as offensive actions or offensive computing. Make sure they understand and speak purple, and that it's not the classic red team approach of we invade everything you have, we break everything you have, we create a report for you, and we dump it on your desk and you give us $50,000. That's the old way. The new way is you integrate as part of an operating model. The teams work side by side. There may be some adversarial action in isolation, but the vast majority of work is in direct relationship, real time, side by side with the defender teams and the development teams, so that they can immediately integrate. So as an example, I don't have an army of purple teamers. Presently from my organization, I have one. But his entire focus is to work directly with my engineers and other service engineers in other parts of the cloud, and side by side. So like our briefing today, this very day, for one of our iterations of that process, very classic agile. You build your sprints, you build your plan, and you go execute, and then you brief it out and you share the findings and you show the mitigations that happened in near real time, and it really produces a positive working together outcome. So
I had one question come through. Can AI help with cloud abuse or make it worse?
AI can absolutely help. And it can make it worse. So the answer is yes. But I tend to be hopefully more of an optimist than a pessimist in the context. The shortest answer is when you think about a body of logs, as an example, and the scale of logs, can a large language model be trained against that text from those logs, and I mean vast logs, to process for very specific indicators or behaviors or predictions? And the answer is yes. The reason I also said it is subject to or will increase abuse is that LLMs and AI in general for the future will be tuned by adversaries and misused by adversaries just as much as any other resource. when you think about a Vertex AI offering or a Copilot offering, the instant and ready misuse of that is already happening. So it is unfortunately just an increasing increment in the arms race, if you will. So the answer is both.
And I think that about wraps up the session. I know, Russ, you had mentioned that people can reach out to you. So just a reminder, Russ.
That's great. I look forward to it. If you have questions, Huva's great, or by all means, LinkedIn and socials, anything that works for you. And then I'm glad to take up additional conversations. But thank you for everybody for your time today. Sam, thanks for hosting, and appreciate it.